As all of us keep close watch on the Trump transition, new details surface, signaling which priorities the president-elect will tackle first and which may become a distant memory. Miranda Kahn has more.
Well, JD, for starters, Trump says that he will focus on immigration and health care. While that may not come as a surprise to many of you, something that did surprise some people is what Trump told 60 Minutes over the weekend, and it continues to resonate even today. As parts of the country continue to be in shock and protests ensue over the election results, President-elect Trump set yet another round of shockwaves when pressed during his first interview after being elected made this remark about his former opponent.
Are you going to ask for a special prosecutor to investigate Hillary Clinton over her emails?
I'm going to think about it.
The Republican outsider who's responsible for chants like this, coining lethal nicknames like
Crooked Hillary Clinton,
who alluded to the fact as commander-in-chief he would drain the swamp of political corruption.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
because you'd be in jail.
And who repeatedly said this about Secretary Hillary Clinton and her husband.
The Clintons are criminals. Remember that. They're criminals.
Appears to be possibly changing, or at the very least, softening his tune.
They're good people. I don't want to hurt them.
Now, just one day after Donald Trump won the election, his campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, seemed to be walking back some of what Trump was saying about Hillary Clinton, including appointing a special prosecutor. Conway said that she hadn't spoken with Trump about that, but that he and Mike Pence were focused more on unifying the country. And JD, that kind of reminds me about that dinner, that Al Smith dinner. Remember this when Trump said this about Clinton? Take a listen.
Hillary accidentally bumped into me, and she very civilly said, "Pardon me." And I very politely replied, "Let me talk to you about that after I get into office."
So maybe they actually did talk about it.
Well, I think that's more playing to the crowd there. And now there's something like playing to the Constitution and
Yes.
the independent judiciary and the Justice Department that under Mr. Obama hasn't been exactly independent. Thanks very much,
My
Miranda.
pleasure.
Let's continue the discussion now as we deal with all of this. It is a question that we put to former New York Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik when he joined us on America Talks Live. Here's what Bernie had to say.
Well, I think it's premature to say, JD. I think the president and his advisors and probably his attorney general nominee, whoever that's going to be, they'll have to sit together and discuss this. It's not an easy issue to deal with. I think you have to look at it from a political perspective. You have to look at it from a realistic perspective. I think it's going to be up to the president-elect and let him make a decision down the road. But I think it's premature for anyone to call that shot right now.
Let's bring back the panel to discuss this. From Newsmax New York, Mark Smith, Senior Fellow in Law and Public Policy at the King's College, and Betsy McCaughey joining us also via Skype from New York, health policy expert and former Lieutenant Governor of the Empire State. Mark, in terms of the whole protocol about a special prosecutor, Mr. Trump has to maintain an air of allowing independence, if you will. It's way premature for him to be discussing possible criminal wrongdoing involving his opponent, right? Shouldn't he have just left it alone completely last night?
No, I think it was a perfectly fine answer, but as a practical matter, the first thing that's going to have to be is he's going to have to nominate an attorney general, and that person will have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And then at that point, the Attorney General of the United States has the job of enforcing the law, and whoever that Attorney General is will have the opportunity to take a look at the facts. Remember, it's not just Hillary Clinton, it's not just the Clinton Foundation, it's all the people that touch fingers with those, with Hillary and also with the foundation and the emails and the like, to take a look at what's going on. And I think that Donald Trump did the right thing to say, look, this is not the highest priority. This is something that we can look at down the road if need be. But again, it's not really a today issue.
And when he said he did not want to hurt people, Betsy, changing subjects to something you've studied very closely, Obamacare is hurting a lot of people. Here's part of the exchange from the 60 Minutes interview last night. Let's look and listen.
You say you're going to repeal and replace. When you replace it, are you going to make sure that people with preconditions are still covered?
Yes, because it happens to be one of the strongest assets.
You're going to keep that?
Also, with the children living with their parents for an extended period, you're going to
keep that?
Very much try and keep that. Adds cost, but it's very much something we're going to try and keep.
And there's going to be a period, if you repeal it and before you replace it, when millions of people could lose.
We're going to do it simultaneously. It'll be just fine.
Betsy, your take on that exchange and the reality of repealing and replacing Obamacare.
Well, first of all, the Republicans have been working in both the House and Senate for a long time on repeal and replace legislation. And Donald Trump has a plan as well, and they're all quite similar. So they are really quite ready on day one to act on this issue. Number two, Donald Trump has said several times, including to Dana Bash at CNN way back in February, that people with pre-existing conditions would be protected under a new plan. So there's nothing new about that. And parents would be able to keep children on their plans until age 26. And let me underscore one more thing that will remain relatively constant, and that is that Medicaid, where most uninsured people are now getting covered, that's also going to continue. The lion's share of people who gain coverage under Obamacare are enrolled in Medicaid. So three of the major concerns that are repeatedly voiced by people who are opposing repeal, in fact, are already being taken care of in whatever plan is put forward in January.
To that point, President Obama at his press conference earlier today spoke about what Mr. Trump has planned, and here is the current president's take on all of that.
And if things get worse, then the American people will figure that out pretty quick. And if things get better, then more power to them. And I'll be the first to congratulate him.
Mark, what do you make of that magnanimity? Do you? Is there anything we can take away from that?
Yeah, it's just stating the obvious, right? I mean, as Barack Obama taught us all, right, elections have consequences. And I think the election of Donald Trump, where one of the critical platform positions was the repeal and replacement of Obamacare, I think that's a high priority, and that's something we're going to see pretty soon. And I agree, the right answer is, from Barack Obama's point of view as well, hopefully it'll be better, because I hope, presumably he loves America and wants it to be better for all Americans. And I'll give the president credit for, saying that. And I think that's the right response. And I actually, hope and believe that he wants what's best for America, even if the president is Donald Trump.
And to that end, Betsy, some other news over the weekend that broke really early during the weekend, and that was the news that Mr. Trump was making a change in the transition team. Chris Christie could devote his full attentions to being governor of New Jersey, and Vice President-elect Mike Pence takes over primary responsibility for this transition. Your take on that move, Betsy? We have about a minute left.
Well, I think Mike Pence is a terrific choice because he has very strong relationships with congressional leadership. And that's what's needed now as they identify people they want confirmed in the Senate, as they start shaping legislation that they want to be consistent with what Paul Ryan, for example, in the House has drafted as part of his Better Way. In both cases, legislatively and for Senate approvals, Mike Pence is the person to orchestrate this relationship between the president-elect and the incoming Congress.
Almost sets up, too,
And, I
go
would
ahead
add,
very quickly,
JD.
Mark. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I would quickly add, JD, that, just so people watching understand that there's a transition process that starts in August and runs to the election. And for the winning side, the transition, of course, continues onward. So, it's not a shock that Chris Christie, ran a transition up until the election and then, he's replaced by someone else, let's say. That's really not that unusual and not really a shock.
Of course, it will be interesting since the vice president-elect takes that on. One can see Mr. Trump as chief executive officer and perhaps Mr. Pence as chief operating officer, at least in the organizational boxes. Betsy and Mark, we thank you very much. Up next, comedian Dave Chappelle and talk show host Oprah Winfrey standing up in support of Donald Trump. We'll talk to Diamond and Silk about that when Newsmax Prime continues.